Shalom. There's a burden that is on people's shoulders right now that I believe is either placed there by other people, man-made tradition kind of coming from a good place, trying to keep a commandment of Yahusha, or it's just coming from like misunderstanding the scripture. And I think when we look at the scripture as a whole, looking at places new and old, we can get a better picture. The particular command that I'm talking about is found in Shemot, also known as Exodus, chapter 23:13. And in all that I have said to you, take heed, and make no mention of the name of other mighty ones. Let it not be heard from your mouth. I don't want to make this very long, but basically trying to get to the point of this is there's this burden that is placed on people. It's a burden that I had on myself for several years. And it really came down to misunderstanding what this was saying. And I took it to mean we do not say the names of idols. And that can be a little bit difficult, especially as you learn more about, I'm assuming I'm speaking to someone who's understanding English. So English in particular, there are many words that are derived from idols' names. I mean, and even other languages, I know there's that kind of thing that can happen. And so I found myself doing my best to avoid saying certain words that were derived from idols' names, because I found it to be keeping righteousness. But over time, and over a really long time, because I'm a slow learner, Yahusha eventually showed me, hey, this is not exactly what I mean by the upkeep of this command. And honestly, the kind of evidence of this was in the scriptures this whole time. It kind of shows how great of a student I am. But again, I'm a learning child, and I praise Yahusha for him being very patient with me. Anyhow, pointed examples. We have Mosheh, also known as Moses, Ěliyahu, also known as Elijah, and we have Yahusha, Messiah. Three men that I believe anyone can attest to say that they are righteous, that there is evidence in the scriptures that they indeed make it into the reign of Yahusha. And so if they're doing something, we probably can look up to their examples, especially in regards to this command. And I point out these three because there are instances that I found that quote them speaking out loud the names of idols. And thinking about that, and then reflecting on the English translation of Exodus 23:13, it just kind of has to beg the question of, like, am I understanding this correctly? I believe that I've misunderstood it for several years, and now with better understanding, there is just a little bit less of a burden when it comes to especially communicating with those that are not quite in the belief. Let's say they're just straight up in religion, man-made, just religion, traditional kind of stuff. Or maybe they're just, a common secular person. Communication is powerful. It's how we can connect with other people, and especially when it comes to sharing the good news. We want communication to be clear, to be effective. And so part of the burden, besides like idols' names, not that at all should we be saying some idol's name for their reverence. That I don't see ever from any of the righteous ones. However, in reference, yes, there are such instances. And if there is allowance to say idols' names in reference, and thus not breaking this command in Shemot 23:13, then wouldn't there be that much more blamelessness for words that supposedly kind of like are from idols' names, derived from, things like that. And for me, my understanding now is like, yeah, I freely, without any kind of like, oh no, am I sinning? Will say English words that may have some etymological tie to an idol's name. Now, we're not the ones like creating these words and like, oh, in reverence of this mighty one, I'm gonna create this word. Like, no, but here we are, born into a certain language, certain peoples, wherever you are in the world. And if you find that that language has some things that are like tied to people's sin in the past, like Yahusha is compassionate, firstly. And secondly, we don't need to be worried about transgression. I do want to say that one of the big influences for me early on was the book, Come Out of Her, My People. It's like a purple book, if I remember correctly. It was something I read earlier in my walk. And there's a ton of like etymological ties, words that like were just commonly used. And then you find out like, whoa, came from this idol, and there's this idol over here and this idol over here that has a similar name, sound, yada, yada. Really fascinating, and kind of, also like, wow, okay, I thought like all these words I just can't say, they're pagan, and it pushed me to try and learn Hebrew. In general, Hebrew's awesome, of course, like it's the main language spoken by the people that Yahusha decided to talk to the rest of humanity. And so, yeah, I find it to be important, and I find it to be special. And at the same time, over the years, I've learned that just because someone is fluent in Hebrew or says certain Hebrew sounding words, it doesn't necessarily mean that their heart is in the right place. And then there can be people who are just speaking plain English, and they have the heart that Yahusha absolutely desires. But overall, of course, we want to, I know I am such a one, and I know that there are many of my brothers and sisters that, want to try and have as clean a lip as possible, just out of respect and just out of like, oh, I just feel like this is just better. I just like speaking this word versus an English word or what have you. I get that. At the same time, it's when, and sadly I've seen it, when there's persecution of others for, oh, you can't say this word, how dare you say that, when it's like, okay, they're not actually breaking any command there by speaking that. And so this is the burden that I'm talking about, that